Okay, today we're talking about how to prove lines are parallel. And this is going to be nice and easy. It's just going to be the converse of the relationships that we knew were true if we knew the lines were parallel. So let's take a look at what we mean by that. So the conditional is given if two lines are parallel, that's my P, then corresponding angles are congruent. Corresponding angles are congruent. That's my Q. Okay, so what would the converse look like? The converse, remember, switches the order. So that says Q implies P. So that would say if corresponding angles are congruent, if corresponding angles, and here we can use our symbols to abbreviate angles are congruent, then two lines are parallel. I mean, you can use our symbol for parallel, which looks like two lowercase l's. Okay, so let's try using the converse of the relationships that we've already been working with this unit. So here we have a picture of two corresponding angles. Now, what the converse says is that if corresponding angles are congruent, so if corresponding, and we can abbreviate corresponding angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. So now we can mark those lines parallel. If we know those two are congruent, then we know those lines are parallel, okay? Similarly, here we have two alternate interior angles, and they're both marked congruent. Well, we know that if the lines are parallel, alternate interior angles are congruent. So the converse says, if alternate interior angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. And so I can mark them parallel because we know that'll be true. Let's try another one. Okay, here we have consecutive interior angles or same side interior. For same side interior, they're not marked congruent. If we want to prove the lines are parallel, we've got to know that they're supplementary. So I'll put different angle marks on them, okay? And so then we can say if consecutive interior angles are congruent. Oh, sorry, not congruent. Let's try that again. If consecutive interior angles are supplementary, then the lines are parallel. Okay, so why did I get tripped up on that one? Because I'm used to calling that same side, but we've got to be comfortable with either one. So a little self-correction there is a good thing. If same side interior angles are congruent, then if same side interior angles are supplementary, then the lines are parallel. Okay. All right, let's try the next one. Alternate exterior angles, converse. Okay, so here we have alternate exterior angles and they're marked congruent. We know that if alternate exterior angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. So then I can mark those two lines parallel. Okay. Again, similarly here, we can mark those parallel once we know that the consecutive interior angles are supplementary. So if consecutive interior angles are supplementary, then the lines are parallel. Okay, let's try some examples. Now here you might want to use your highlighters if you have highlighters. We've got lots of choices of lines here. So this is why I like my highlighters. Okay. First of all, I want to mark, it says angle 2 is congruent to angle 4. So let's go mark that. Angle 2 is congruent to angle 4. If I'm looking at that setup, then where are my parallel lines? These are the two parallel lines. And this is the transversal that creates those two angles with the parallel lines. Okay. So it asks which lines are parallel. Well, we know that line A is the transversal. So which are the two parallel lines? It's line C that's parallel to line D. So that's my parallel line symbol, okay? And So what's the relationship? What's the converse relationship that proves that these lines are parallel? Well, 2 and 4 are corresponding angles. So if corresponding angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. Okay, let's look at the next one. It tells us angle 5, so here's angle 5, is congruent to angle 10. Okay, so what's going on there? Where are the lines that form those angles? Let's take a look. So this line forms that angle, and this line forms that angle, and this transversal forms that angle. Okay, so those are what type of angles? Those are alternate interior angles. And so if alternate interior angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. So just like if we know the lines are parallel, then we know those angles will be congruent. The converse is also true. If we know those angles are congruent, then it means that those lines must be parallel. And so I'm going to go ahead and mark those two lines parallel. It's line A is parallel to line B. Here it was line C that was parallel to line D. Let's try our next one. This one, plus the measure of angle 10. Now notice it didn't say they are congruent, so I'm going to mark it with different angle marks on it because they are not congruent. The measure of angle 6 plus the measure of angle 10 is 180. That means that they are supplementary. So what kind of angles are those? Those are same side interior angles. And if same side interior angles are supplementary, that's what they have to be, is supplementary. And we know they are because it says here that they add to 180. Okay, so that's how we know. If same side interior angles are supplementary, what does that imply? Then we know the lines are parallel. Okay, so which lines are we talking about? Let's take a look at the picture. What are the lines that form those angles? We've got this line and this line. So those are the parallel lines. And we've got this single transversal that cuts across it to form those angles, okay? So the lines there that we're looking at are line A is parallel to line B. Line A and B are the two parallel ones, okay? The parallel lines have the same slope and the same rate of change, so they're headed the same direction. The transversal is the one that cuts across them. Okay, let's try a few more of those. Here we're given that angle 1, so here's angle 1, is congruent to angle 14 right there. So what's the relationship between angle 1 and angle 14? Those are alternate exterior angles. And if alternate exterior angles are congruent, because we were given that they are congruent, okay, if alternate exterior angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. And we can use our symbols. Okay, so which lines are we talking about? This time, it's easy for me to see the transversal that helps form them. And where are the parallel lines? That's these two lines that the transversal cuts across, okay? So again, that's going to be line A is parallel to line B because angle 1 and angle 14 are alternate exterior angles, and if they're congruent, then the lines have to be parallel. So I can mark those lines parallel, okay? All right, let's take a look at the next one. It says the measure of angle 14, this angle, plus the measure of angle 15. Now notice it didn't say they're congruent, so I'm not going to assume they're congruent. I'm going to put a different mark on that angle. Angle 14 and 15 add up to 180, so that means they're supplementary. They're supplementary. Okay, so what's the relationship between those angles? Sometimes I can tell right away what the relationship is, and sometimes I need to actually find my lines or highlight my lines there to kind of help me with that. So on this one, I see that they're formed by this line and this line. And where's the transversal? This is the transversal that cuts across those two lines that helps form those angles, okay? So if I look at those parallel lines, what's the relationship with angle 14 and angle 15? They're on the same side of the transversal, and they're both interior between the parallel lines. So that's same side interior, and we know that if same side interior angles are supplementary, then the lines are parallel. Those same relationships that if we knew the lines were parallel, then we knew these relationships were true. They work in the converse. If these relationships are true, then the lines are parallel. So which two lines is that? That's line C is parallel to line D in this picture. Okay, let's try the next one. It says angle 11 is congruent to angle 16. Okay, now what are those? Those are vertical angles. Okay, those are vertical angles. We knew about vertical angles before we even started this unit on parallel lines. Vertical angles means no conclusion. The lines might be parallel or they might not be. It doesn't matter. Vertical angles are always congruent, and so that doesn't tell us anything. So we can make no conclusion when it's vertical angles. Similarly, if you want to write that bigger, so there's no conclusion if they're vertical angles. They might be, they might not be. We just can't tell with that information. Okay, let's try another one. Okay, so angle 10 is congruent to angle 12. So find angle 10 and it's congruent. So I'll put the same mark on angle 12. Okay, so can you see what's the relationship between those angles and can you find the lines? Sometimes I like to find the lines first. I see that's this line and this line. And where's the transversal? So the transversal on these is this line. Okay, so that makes those angles. Okay, so what's the relationship of those? Those are both in the top right in their group of 4 angles. Those are in corresponding positions. We know if corresponding angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. So all we're doing today is going backwards from the relationships we learned about before. So that means that these lines must be parallel. So I can mark them parallel. They want to know which ones it is. That's line C is parallel to line D. Okay, and those lines are parallel. Okay, the measure of angle 9, it's this angle plus the measure of angle 13. Now, they did not say that they're congruent, so I'm going to have to assume that they're different and put a different congruency mark on it. It says that those add up to 180. What's that relationship? What's going on there? That's just a linear pair. Just like vertical angles, we knew about linear pairs long before we started talking about parallel lines. Linear pair implies no conclusion. They might be parallel, they might not be. We can't tell from the fact that it's a linear pair because linear pairs always are supplementary. Okay, so no conclusion on a linear pair. Let's try our next one. Angle 2 is congruent to angle 7. That's this one. Okay, now that might look to you like they're on different lines, but if we can look at this as one of our lines and this is one of our lines, we're looking at the lines that form those angles, then this would be my transversal, okay, to form those angles. So now where the angle 2 and angle 7 relative to each other, they're on alternate sides of the transversal and they're both interior between those two lines. We know if alternate interior angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. Which lines are parallel? Let's see. It looks like line C is parallel to line D. Okay, remember we can name lines with a single lowercase cursive letter.